Behind me is a portion of the Gettysburg Cyclorama. You can go to Gettysburg National Military Park and see it today, and it's really quite spectacular. Um, what it is a huge painting that goes 360 degrees, almost entirely around the audience. And so you go into the center, and you can look all around, and you can see in every direction a portion of the Battle of Gettysburg. And in the 19th century, cycloramas were not uncommon. They were the equivalent of an IMAX movie back in the day, and so they were taken from one city to another and displayed, and thousands of people came to see them. But very few of them remain today. One that does is this Gettysburg cyclorama, um, and it's by way of introduction to the next 2 weeks of the course, in which we will be dealing with the American Civil War and its outcome. Now, one point to be made here about the cyclorama is it makes the Civil War battle look romantic. And even though men are shown being killed and wounded and so forth, the overall effect is to give you the impression that the Civil War was neat. Well, it wasn't. It was a conflict in which we now think about 800,000 Americans died on both sides. And this comes to about 3% of the American population in that during the Civil War era, and about 8% of those men of military age. So it was really quite catastrophe. It was a major failure for American democracy, and these are considerations that really never should be lost upon you. The kind of people who go and see the cyclorama are people who are interested in the Civil War in a military sense, almost kind of as an American Iliad, in which the major characters are Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant and Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, and so on. And one of the things that these lay students of the American Civil War still consider to be important is the moral equivalence of the Union and Confederate causes. That the Union fought for one vision of the American Republic and one set of principles that were key to understanding the American Republic, and then the Confederates fought with equal valor for another equally valid vision of the American Republic and its future and what the essential principles were. This is something that academic historians have rejected for a long time, and this public memory of a moral equivalence between the two sides is now being sort of forcefully attacked, and I think quite rightly so. There might have been a time when this moral equivalence argument was useful in terms of helping the North and South, and by this I really mean Northern and Southern whites, reconcile after the American Civil War, so that after 50 years or so, the bitterness engendered by that war had gone away. But this idea of moral equivalence that once served an important public memory purpose has never been historically accurate. It was obvious to anybody who looked closely at the American Civil War that slavery underpinned it. This is an embarrassing truth, but a truth nonetheless. At this point in our history, it's really important to go back and grasp the inequivalence of the Northern and Southern causes and the importance of slavery and emancipation in terms of understanding the American Civil War. And there's an important military point to be made here, which is that the war's true turning point was not this Battle of Gettysburg and not any other battle. The war's true turning point occurred when the Lincoln administration issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a military necessity, and this transformed the Civil War from a limited war to restore the Union. This was a war fought between the Union and Confederate governments, the Union and Confederate armies, into an all-out, remorseless, revolutionary struggle intended to create a new political, social, and economic order in the American South, and by extension, in the United States in general. So uh, those are the really broad points that I want you to understand about these modules. Now, in terms of what we'll be dealing with this week, the first thing I would like for you to do is to watch a major portion of a presentation that I give in a course I teach on uh, war in world history from basically 1500 to 1900 that deals with the advent of modern war. And this presentation has two parts. Most of it deals with the American Civil War, but the last 18 minutes or so deal with European military developments that are basically contemporaneous with the American Civil War. You're not responsible for the European portion. The other presentation for this week focuses on grand strategy and objectives and the military strategy and then the early battles of the American Civil War. And this is done in broad outline. Now, of this stuff, the key material is the grand strategy. What grand strategy means is you have an objective, and then the question becomes, how are you going to make use of all the resources available to you? Political, informational, diplomatic, military, economic. How are you going to make sure of all the resources that are available to you, and in order to achieve your objective, your broad objective, and that's the essence of grand strategy. So to put it differently, I think I said political the first time. What I mean to say really is diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. Those are the elements of grand strategy. So we're going to look at that this week in the second lecture, and then following that is a required video on the Peninsula Campaign, whose failure in April to early July of 1862, the failure of the Union Army to capture Richmond, which was the objective of the Peninsula Campaign, generated a military stalemate that the Lincoln administration and other Northerners saw the stalemate sort of stretching out to the unforeseeable future. And so at this point, the failure of the Peninsula Campaign caused the Lincoln administration to abandon this early conciliatory policy, this limited war policy, and move to the emancipation of not all slaves, but the slaves who were in the portions of the American South that were still in active rebellion. Lincoln felt that he could do this by way of his authority under the Constitution as commander in chief. You consider the emancipation to be a military necessity to cut the props out from under the Confederate war economy, then this made sense. In other respects, constitutionally, slavery was protected, and it would require an amendment to the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, to finally end slavery in American life. So we'll be looking at all of that this week. Next week, we'll be looking in a more focused way at the role that slavery and emancipation played in the American Civil War. We'll look at the final years of the American Civil War, and then we'll look at Reconstruction violence. So with that, I will leave you to enjoy this week's presentations. Okay, take care.